Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the customer statements. In this week's training, I'm going to show you how to create this incredible customer statements complete with dynamic date range. We can print a single statement, email a single statement, or we can print all statements or email based on various options. It's going to be an incredible training. I cannot wait. So let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining me today. I've got a really fantastic training, going to be not too long, so that's great. If this application looks familiar, it should. Last week, we did the mini accounting application. It was an incredible accounting application, and I decided why not build right on top of this. Something that's highly been requested is the customer statements, and that's the ability to have all the customer orders and statements in a single document, just as we do very, very often in business. We send our customers a statement of all their invoices and payments and balances and letting them know what's due and what's not. So that is what we're going to create, the customer statement today. And we're building it right on top of this mini accounting application. If you did miss the mini accounting application, it is not necessary, but it is very, very helpful. An incredible training we did last week. I'll include the link down below. That's the mini accounting application. This week, we're building, again, on top of that, the customer statement. So all of this section here on the left is brand new, right? So we're going to cover just this today, and it's going to give us the ability to create a customer statement based on date range, based on a specific statement date. We'll be able to do front to. We'll be able to customize a footer. The footer here, right in the statements, located in custom footer here. So we've got a custom footer and a lot of customizing options. So I hope you'll stick with us on this training. It's going to be really great and a great addition. If you like these trainings, I just ask a few things. All you need to do is just subscribe to the channel. I'll make sure these notifications get to you as long as you click on that notification icon bell. If you like these trainings, I've got 250 of my best templates available for you right now, and I'm going to include the mini accounting application as a special bonus, of course, on top of that, if you choose the 250 workbook with PDF option. And that means the PDF code books are included, and you can go step by step, line by line inside the code with those PDFs. So I hope you pick that up. That's the 250 workbook all in a single zip file. I'll include the link down below. Let's get started on this training. So what is the idea? The idea is when we create an invoice, or we've been invoicing our customers, we sometimes also want to send them a statement, or maybe we want to send them regular monthly statements for those people with balances. We can do that now with this application. For example, if we decide that we want to print this statement and we want to include the selected invoice, all we need to do is just print it. It's going to print it twice. We'll print the invoice first, and then of course it'll print that particular statement second. So you see the invoice appeared first, and then we have the statement. This particular statement is actually 3 pages long. We'll be able to do multi-page statements. So if I'll bring it up here, we see that we actually have 3 different pages on this statement. So it's a really flexible application add-on, and we're going to show you every step. I'll also be able to email those statements, and of course we are going to print multiple statements for any customers with we can do any balance or any overdue balance, any balances greater than 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days. We are going to have all of that available on the statement. Now, this, of course, is the invoice order. We covered this in the original training. We've got add new estimates, work orders, and invoices. We're not going to get into that. We're just going to be focused on the statements. Now, the statement itself is located on the right side here. This is the actual statement. This is what gets populated, and we can do up to 3 different sheets. Of course, you can add on more as you see fit. Okay, these individual statements have a header of, we've got a customer name and customer information. We've got a statement date, a from date, a to date, and the account balance, along with columns of order date, order number, the order type, right? If we want to put in multiple orders, let's say maybe we do want to have estimates located also in the statement, we can do that. When we generate that particular statement, all we need to do is just add that in there. Very easily, we can preview that, and that's going to generate it with that particular or those orders in there. And so now we have estimates. As you see, we've printed out, and they do include estimates. And on our original, they now include estimates. So we can do other order types. Here we've got estimates now, or maybe we only want it for invoices. So we can say unselect estimates. We can do that with work orders or purchase orders if we wanted to. We can include all of those. So it's going to be really, really a flexible type of account statement that we're going to be able to add in here and preview it. And I'm going to walk you through every single step, of course. And so what we do have here is the original invoice, and we have all these. So all these sections is for the customer statement. If we want a specific date range, like this month or last month, that year, we can add in those date ranges as well. That particular date range comes from our admin section. This admin screen is from the original mini accounting. However, the part that we're going to be using today is this date range right here. We've got a named range called date range. There's corresponding from and to addresses, to dates. So that means when we go ahead and change that date range inside the order screen, when I make that change, I want to make sure that the dates, the from date and the to date automatically change. It's currently in June, so the last month was, of course, May 1st to May 31st. However, if we want to change it to today, would be the June 16th, which is the current date of this recording. So we'll keep it on this year. That's going to allow us the most flexibility, the most type of orders. Again, we want to have a statement footer. Maybe we want a footer at the bottom of the statement. If we scroll over here, we see that we do have a footer here as mentioned previously. And I want that footer to be based on footers that we add inside the admin screen. So now inside the admin screen, we have footers for, of course, previously we had footers for invoices and estimates and work orders and purchase orders. And now we can also put in one for our statement, which is nice. We have a default statement in case we want to add that. So we can put that in, payment details, and we can put in any footer message that we want to appear on our statement. And that, of course, is going to be printed on a PDF, on a printer, or a preview when we do see that footer on each and every page of the statement. So if we scroll over here, we do see that. Now, to get to that, all we need to use is a formula because we know it. So if we scroll over here and we take a look at the formula inside here, what we want to do is we want to insert the footer message text. Now, this particular named range is the named range for our text. So if I look into formulas and name manager, and I scroll down and I see look for footer message text, that's the one that's going to be the text based on all the text inside our admin screen. We also have footer message name. These are for the name. So I've got two different individual named range, both dynamic, so they're going to grow as we add them, one for the name and one for the text. And that way we can easily assimilate both of them. So when we know when the user enters a specific statement footer here from a data validation, we take a look at this, data, and then go to data validation, we see that this is the footer message name. So the user can select between all the footer message names. When they do that, what we're going to do is use a formula. We're simply going to index the footer message text. We're going to match it based on what the user has entered in D20. And then what we're going to do is going to look for the specific row. We're going to return the first column, and that is going to return the footer message text. We're going to use that same formula on each of the sheets. So we have that. In fact, I'm going to link this. This is going to be equal to, I'm just going to link this to the first sheet right here. And I'm going to do the same thing with the last sheet. And that's exactly what I want. We don't need to use the same formula. It's volatile, so we don't need that. All we need to do is just link it to the first one. And that is going to be sufficient. So that way we have the same footer message that's going to appear on every sheet. I'm going to show you how to automatically add in these page breaks when we print it out. Okay, so we also we also have linked up. So what we want to do is I have a linked, notice that's linked to D15. We've selected a specific customer that we want to create it. We have a list of names here that we want to actually create it. So we would select from a name. Now these named range, if we take a look inside the data and the data validation, we see that we've got customer names. This is a dynamic named range based on our names database. Now our names database, keep in mind, can take vendors, employees, and customers. However, we created a unique list of customers only located right here. This is our list of customers. This is what we're going to stick to. Basically, this is a name that we're using an advanced filter. When we run that advanced filter, we're going to only have the type of customers. We then want a unique name, and then we're going to sort it accordingly. That's automated already. But this is where the list is coming from. So we have a list of customers. So what I want to do is when I enter a customer on those order screen, I want to make sure that the address gets automated. So if I change this to Nancy Smith, I want to make sure that Nancy Smith gets, the address gets populated here. So we're going to use VBA. So that's automatically using VBA, while this particular is located directly in D15 with absolute. So it's simply connected to whatever the user. It is VBA, which we'll be getting into in a moment, that will automatically take care of populating that address here. And on the subsequent sheets here, when we scroll down, we see the subsequent sheets. It's simply linked to the top, the first sheet, right? They're all just linked to the first sheet so that we can have duplicates. So also we have a statement date. This is, of course, is located also to our statement date right here. If we go ahead and hide these temporarily, we don't need to see that for the moment. So I'm simply going to hide those columns so we can get a better look at that. We don't have to worry about that logo. So now we can see a little bit clearer, so we can see how that they're linked. Okay, maybe I'll put in a toggle there for our Patreon members, right? So we can have more functionality. We can toggle between the statements, but we can also preview the statements. So we have both. Okay, this is just coming from the invoice. We'll keep that right there. We didn't hide it. So what we have is we have our link. So we've got our statement date that is actually linked to our statement date here, located in D17. We have our from date, which is located in D18. And we have our to date, which is located in D19 here. And then our statement footer. I've also got an account balance. Now, account balance is going to be a formula. And we have some brand new named ranges that are going to help us with that. So what is it that we want to do to create that? So let's take a look in some of our new named ranges. I've got a few named range added based on our orders database. Now, this orders database is where all the orders are tracked, right? When I create a new order, it's given a new ID. The type, is it a work order, a purchase order, an invoice, an order date, the status, and all the information that are associated with that order. Now, I've created some additional named ranges that are going to help us. So let's go ahead and take a look at those. Name manager, just to go over, if you didn't watch that original training, don't worry, we're going to go over everything, so it's not necessary for this type of training. So I have an order ID. An order ID is the original ID. That is important. I've got an order due date going in order, so we have the due date, a named range based on all the due dates. We've got an order balance. Now, this balance is calculated based on a formula, based on the amount of payments, the total of the invoice minus the number of payments, and that could use for purchase orders as well. So purchase orders and invoices, we do have a balance on those. And then we've got a dynamic named range associated with that. Likewise, I also want to know the payments. If payments have been made, I want a named range for that, named range for order type, and a named range for order total. So they all have named ranges, unique, and that's just kind of the way I like to do it, because I like to use those in formulas. So I've created all of those very specifically, and of course a name, right? If we're going to be using 𝐸𝑠𝑢𝑚 for only a very specific name, we're certainly going to need one for the name. All right, so let's close this out and let's go ahead and take a look back inside the orders. And as we were focusing on the account balance, so for the account balance, basically all I want to do is sum the order balance. Now this is going to help. That's that named range. And we only want to focus on invoice types. Only want the order type should only be the invoice order. Now this invoice order is a dynamic type based on here, this invoice order right here, because users can change the name, right? Maybe they want to call it receipt or bill order, something like that. So we've got a named range, whatever the user has decided, this is the invoice order. So every type of order for this type, we are going to sum up. And I also want to add and make sure that the criteria is also based on the customer name as well. So the order name, that named range that we just went over, must be equal to whatever's in D15. D15 is the customer. So that as we change the customer and then we update our particular, let's go ahead and update that. So I just want to show one. So here, this particular customer, Nancy Smith, she has just a single invoice that's outstanding, right? There's been no payments on it. We've got a due date for it. If we take a look down here, we see that she's 61 through 90 days past due on that balance. She's got a total due. Now, a credit could be nice because a credit, if they make, every once in a while, a customer will make payments that are larger than the actual amount due, and then would show a credit on their balance. So that could be very, very helpful. So this is a single page customer statement, and they've got a balance of 42.90 based on that single invoice. Okay, so all we're going to be doing is summing that up based on that. Okay, so for the formulas, let's take a look at some of the formulas now that we understand. We have a current balance here, and we're going to use the 𝐸𝑠𝑢𝑚 for this. This 𝐸𝑠𝑢𝑚 is going to help us. Again, we're going to sum the order balances. I want to know the order type based on only the invoice orders. I want to know the order name, right? Name based on the customer name. And I also want the order due date. The due date must be greater than or equal to today. So the due date, that means those due dates that are in the future that would be considered current, right? So anything with that. That's why it's so helpful to have those named ranges. How about 1 through 30 days past due? Well, that's going to be a little bit different. We're just going to start it out with all the same based on the balance, based on the invoice type, based on the customer. Then we have a due date. I want the order due date is going to be less than or equal to day. And in addition, the order due date has to be greater than or equal to today minus 30. Today minus 30. So that means that window date, the current date, and 30 days before. That is where we want the due date to fall. And if the due date falls within this particular range, less than today, but greater than today minus 30, then it's going to be 1 through 30 days past due. Likewise, on 31 through 60, going to be almost the same, except this one, it's going to be, the due date is going to be less than today minus 30, and it also must be greater than or equal to today's date minus 60. So that's how we're going to fall into that window. Likewise, of course, 61 through 90, you can imagine it's going to be the less than or equal, less than today's date minus 60, or greater than today's date minus 90. Over 90 going to be a little bit simpler. All we need to do is just today's date less than 90. And anything over that is going to be today's date less than 90, okay? So that's all we have to do for that. So anything beyond that, of course, is going to be over 90 days. So that's all we want. We want due date anything less than 90, okay? Less than today, minus 90. Okay, what about the total due? The total due is simply the same formula that we have up here. It's just a duplicate there. And now credits. What if we have a credit? Well, basically, when the total number of payments are greater than the total amount due, that is a credit balance. Okay, so all we need to do is, again, use sum if, but this time we're focused on payments. We're going to sum all the payments, also based on the order type of invoice, also based on the specific customer. When the total number of those payments is based on the total number of the invoice, this time order total, okay? When the order total based on that particular invoice type, based on that customer, when we have the payments that are greater than, we simply then want to take that, the total number of payments, minus the total amount of invoices. That subtraction, the difference is going to be the credit on account. Basically, if the customer has paid $100, but the total invoices are only $80, you would see a $20 here. So for example, let's take this $42.90. Let's say that customer decides to pay $50, they're going to have it. So if we go into this particular order, let's see order number 11, we go into that orders database and we take a look at order number 11, we see that there's no payments on it with a balance of 42. However, if I make a payment of $50 and change that up, we now have a credit balance. And if I look back inside the orders and scroll down, we see that they now have a credit of $710. And we can update that. If it's not negative, I'll make sure that that's updated so that we don't have that, right? So less than should be only there. So that would show a credit on the account of $7. And I'll make sure that that shows 0 on that, but we have to apply that payment. If that payment shows up here, it will be correct. Okay, great. So we understand how that works, and we can undo that because I do want that to show up here. All right. Continuing on, so we kind of understand exactly all of the formulas that are going into it. They're relatively simple. Let's get into some of the VBA, just a little bit of the on-sheet VBA. We've got VBA that when this date range is changed, both the from and the to date are changed. And we also have some VBA that when we change a customer here, that address is going to be changed here automatically. So how are we going to do that? Well, of course, that's going to be on the worksheet change event. And we're getting into the VBA and do that. So inside the developer, Visual Basic or Alt F11. And we're going to focus on the order sheet. This is the order sheet here. That's the one we're focused on. And we're focused on worksheet change, right? Worksheet change event. On the statement date range change. So when the user makes a change to D16, that is when we want something to happen. Well, what do we want to happen? Well, the first thing is I want to determine to make sure that they have selected something within that date range. So we're going to dimension the date range as a string and the date range row as long, because I need to find out what row I'm going to look for the date range that they've made the change to. I'm going to find out what row it is. Once I know what row it is, I can then extract the from date, and I can extract the to date from that and place those directly inside our sheet, our cells here and here. So that's just what we're going to do inside VBA. So the date range is going to be that target value. That's the value that the user has changed. Then I'm going to extract that row. Remember, I need that row. Where where am I going to look? I'm going to look inside the admin sheet here. I'm going to look at this named range called date range. That's that dynamic date range based on all of our date ranges. I'm going to find what the user has just changed. Date range. Of course, that is going to be the target value. It's also going to be the value right here in D16. Okay. What I want to do is I want to look inside the values, and I want to look at the whole, and I want to extract the row from it. Once I've extracted the row, I want to run a check. If it's not found, it will create an error. Therefore, we've wrapped it in on error, resume next, and on error, go to 0. And then we're just going to run a check. If the range row does not equal 0, then we know it has been found. If it has been found, I can then take D18 and place directly inside that from date whatever's in Q and the range row. So coming from the admin screen, column Q here, whatever the row has been found, I'm going to place whatever value there. And likewise, from S is going to be that to date. And that's going to go directly inside D19. So that's all we need to do. And then I'm just going to run and calculate. I want to make sure that all the formulas get calculated based on that. So I'm just going to calculate that automatically. Great. So that's the only VBA as far as the date range. But now we have a little VBA on basically on the statement name change, set the address, right? Just as we did here, we go back into orders and we make that name change. I want to make sure that the address is automatically updated, just like this. So I want to pull that. Now those addresses are going to come directly from our names database, right? When I find a specific name, I want to put in the address, the city, the state, and the zip code. I want to put those all in there. So of course, that is going to come also in VBA when a user makes a change to D15. So that's what we have coming up next. When the user makes a change to D15, and we want to make sure that D15 is not empty, then what I want to do is I also want to make sure that B19 is not empty. B19 is the calculated row. Let's take a look at B19. B19 is going to let us know what row the customer is on, and it's going to be based exactly on whatever they've entered inside D15. We're going to use the match formula, and the match formula is going to let us know whatever's in D19, and they're going to look up that customer inside name names. Name names is the named range that we're using for the name names. So if we go into the formulas and the name manager and we look up name names, I know it's kind of funny here, and we see that here it's going to be basically a dynamic named range based on all the names in our list. Okay, so once we have that, we can then determine exactly what the next step is. So we know that B19, and we want to make sure that it's not empty. Okay, so we're going to extract the row that's been there using that match formula. We're going to put that into a variable called name row. That's going to be that found name row. Then what we're going to be doing is I'm going to populate that address. That address is found on column D in the names database. If we take a look inside the names database, inside column D, we're going to find that address. The remaining city, state, and zip are going to come from E, F, and G. But first, what we're going to do inside, we're going to put that directly inside AA6. We're going to place that address. So AA6 is going to take on that address. The next row down, AA7 is going to take on 3 of them. It's going to take on that city, it's going to take on that state, and it's going to take on that zip code coming from E, F, and G. And that's it. That's the only VBA as far as the on-sheet changes that we have, okay? Relatively simple. So what we want to do now is when we make a change, when I preview it, when I do any of these preview it, or when I print a statement or email statement, I want to automatically generate that statement. Notice how that happened, right? So now if we take a look inside, we see that we've now generated a statement based on this, and it's going to be nearly 2.5 or almost 3 pages long because they've got a lot of, I've added a lot. This particular customer here, Jackie, I've added a lot of orders for that just so I can see. So we see here inside the database, she's got a lot of orders just so I can see what a multi-page looks like. So when I do that preview, there's a macro that runs. It's going to generate that statement and populate that. And it's going to be based on several factors. Of course, what we want to do is I want to run an advanced filter, and I'm going to base it on that particular customer name and base it on some of the other factors, right? Base it on the from date, make sure the orders are from, and the to date based within this range. It's also going to be based on which of the order types do they want to include in the statement. So we've got to write some formulas for that, and we're going to use an advanced formula for that. So let's go ahead and take a look inside the orders database because I need to make sure that the results of those are going to be based on this, right? So if I decide to include estimates and I do preview, right? So then we can close that out. I guess we don't need this here, right? So we want to make sure whether we're going to include estimates or not on that. So how are we going to do that? If we take a look inside the orders database, I've got some criteria that we're going to focus on here. These are from our dashboard, so we don't need to focus on that. But we do want to focus all the way over here looking for outstanding customer statement criteria. This is what we're going to be focused on here. So what I want to do is I want to know what order types are we going to have, right? Notice that it's invoice and estimates. I want to know if we're going to be using a balance, right? Sometimes we're going to have a balance or not. And also I want to know the order date, and I want to know the name, right? So how do we do that? Well, the first thing what I want to do is I want to link it, right? I want to know what types are we going to show purchase orders. Notice if I go into orders here and I select work orders and I select purchase orders and I go back to the database, we now see that all these values are open. That means when we run this criteria, I want to include purchase orders, invoices, work orders, and estimates. However, if I unselect those and I only want to show invoices, unselecting these, we've got them some linked cells. Now, if we take a look at these options, we've got them linked. Now, keep in mind that I actually have two different boxes here. I've got an option group and a text box. Why? I have a checkbox and a text box. Why do I have both? Because I want the text in here to be dynamic. So the text is located here. Here's the text of it. And this is actually the group here. Let's pull the text up here. There we go. Okay, so this is the checkbox. It's going to be based on B15. So if we take a look here, B15, B16, B17, B18. So all those checkboxes are located based on that option here. So if I unselect this and select the text box, there's the text box there. And this text box, right, here's the text box that we see. If I move it out, you can see it's just a text box, right? So that text box is unique because I want to make sure that that text here is based on our dynamic text for estimates, right? Estimates orders, right? And what that means is if they change this to proposal, let's go in the admin screen. If they change this to proposal, I want to make sure that the text is automatically updated and includes that proposal here. So that's why we have it linked separately. That's why we don't have it part of the checkbox. Change it back to estimate. So that's why we have it there, dynamic. So they're separate. So I've got a checkbox. That checkbox extends over that, but I've also got that particular text box here. So I've got a checkbox and a text box, and they are simply grouped together, okay? Keep in mind that the checkbox is linked to B15. And how do I do that? Well, that's just simply if I right click here and I go to format control, you can see that the cell link is B15. I've done that subsequently for both the invoice, work order, and purchase order. And they're all linked to these 4 cells here. So knowing that those are false or true based on which ones I want to see, I can then use these values here based on the user selection here inside our criteria here. So if we take a look at this, if the orders B18 equals true, then the purchase order, the dynamic name for purchase order, otherwise shows 0. Same thing here. If the orders B17, which is that true or false, equals true, then show the dynamic name invoice order, which is invoice. Likewise, we're doing it for work order and for estimate order here. So they're all linked. This way, when I run the criteria, and then we have the dates, our order dates, we have a named range here. I've created a named range for our from date, and that's going to be called statement from date, if we see up here. And I've created another named range called statement to date, and that just makes it a little bit easier inside the formulas so that we know is greater than or equal to statement from date, and also the criteria for the order date is less than or equal to statement to date. Okay, and then the name is simply going to be based on orders D15, which is the name. Okay, so I'm just simply going to duplicate all this down. However, our order types are going to be different. I'm then going to run that automatically here based on that. So that criteria is going to be here. That means every time we run it, if I run it again, this estimate won't show up because we're only showing invoices, right? So if I decide to print this statement, and then it'll print automatically, and that's going to automatically generate that particular, you see it printed there, that's going to automatically refresh that. And you'll see that here inside the orders database, our results are now here. That estimate's gone. So once we run the criteria here inside Advanced Filter, we want the results to come here. Those results are then going to go in our statement. However, we can't just simply paste all of them because, as you can see, it's more than one statement. So we need to determine how many per statement, and then we need to split it up. So we need to determine how many pages, of course. If we take a look at our orders and we go down here, and we see that we only have about, 26, I think? 26 items per sheet. So we know that we're going to have to split it up into multiple sheets, okay? So let's get into the macro and see how it's done. Now, each one of these preview, email, print, or all of them use the same macro to create the statement, and then they go beyond that. Once the statement is created, then they can do the other features. So let's go into that first macro. And I've created a brand new, all the other modules here are focused on the original mini accounting application. However, I've got a brand new module called statement macros. If we go into that and go to the top, I've mentioned some variables, which we will go over. But our first particular macro is called statement create, right? That is the one that creates the statement. It won't print it, it won't email it. It's simply going to populate that statement. But the first thing we want to do is clear all the associated cells inside that statement. Z10 through AF35, Z48 through AF73, and Z86 through AF111. That is basically, we're using 3 sheets. So we're simply clearing out all the values here on the first one here, making sure not the formulas, and all the ones on the second one and all the ones on the third. So all of those are going to get cleared out. We want to make sure that the statement is cleared out. So that's the first thing we're going to do. Second thing we're going to do is determine how many rows we have in our order list and run that advanced filter here. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. The last row based on the orders database. Now we're focused directly on the orders database. So the last row, we're going to set that based on the data. If it's less than 4, that means we have no data. We're going to run that advanced filter, but before we do that, I want to extend down some formulas. It's very important that we have both the customer balance and I want to know the total due date. So I've got a formula in here. This was from our original accounting application, but I just want to make sure that if B4 equals invoice order or purchase order, so we're really focused on the balance only for invoices and purchase orders. Estimates and work orders wouldn't have balances, so we don't want those to be carried over. So only if the order types are invoice or purchase order do I want to bring down a balance. Purchase orders are, of course, items that you purchase and payments that you make. So that's keep track. Whereas invoices are items that you sell and your customers will be paying. So I'm going to have that carry that formula all the way down. So I've got a formula up here. That formula will stay up here, and then I can bring it down. That way I can clear the formula out. It doesn't have to live in this database if it doesn't want to. And so we're going to bring that formula down for every consecutive run, basically simply just looking to see if there's a payment that has been made and if it has subtract from the total. I also want to know the days overdue. I want to bring down that formula. That's going to be helpful. Negative means it's not quite overdue, 8 days overdue. And so what this formula is, again, we're going to check. Is it an invoice order or purchase order? If then, what we're going to be doing is I want to know the difference is if L4, if there's a L4 minus J4, and that's basically if the total minus the payments are greater than 0, that means there's a balance. Then what I want to do is I want to check today minus H4, the current date minus the due date, the current date minus due date. If the current date is greater than the due date, we're going to have a positive. If it's opposite, it's going to be a negative. So that's going to create our days overdue here. So now, once we know the last row, I can bring this formula all the way down to the last row here. In this case, it's 90. So I'm going to bring in all those down to the last row. So once we have that, we can then run our advanced filter. So this will do it correct. Our formula lives in M2, right? So our formula, bring down balance formulas. Actually, I'm going to bring down both balances and formulas. I think I do it twice here. So I'm going to make sure to bring both formulas down. So let's do that here. So basically it's M and N. So I want to bring both M and N. Actually, we don't need this in the balance, meaning I don't need the days overdue until we run another macro, but it's okay. But for this particular macro, we really only need balance, but we'll be using days overdue in an upcoming macro in just a moment. So bringing down the balance is sufficient for this particular advanced filter we're going to run. So now we're going to ready to run our advanced filter from A3 through M. We're going to have that criteria BM through BP6. And what does that mean? I'm going to bring it all over here. So just as we had mentioned before, BM through BP and all the way down to 6. This is where our criteria lives. Then we want those results to appear directly here. Notice that we don't have the days overdue just yet. We'll be getting into that in a little bit. BR through BX is where we want the results to come. So those BR through BX is where. We're going to check the last row of those results, BR. If it is less than 3, we're going to exit the sub. That means we have no data. Now what I need to do is I need to determine, are we going to be using multiple sheets or not, right? I know that if I have more than 26 items, like 27 here, I know that I need an additional sheet. So I know if the row is greater than 29 or 20 greater than or equal to 29, the last row, then I know that we need to add additional sheets, right? Because our original sheet, why is that? Because if you take a look here, this is 27, right? If we take a look in here, we see our statement, we only have the limit of 26 items per. Let's go all the way up. we see that we have 26 items. So to the maximum, if we have more than that, we need an additional sheet. So we need to run a check. That check's going to be right here. If the last row is less than 29, it's a single page. 29 meaning the last row. What does that mean? 29, if we take a look in the orders database, 29 would be 1. So this 28 meaning 28 or less, that means we have 26 rows, and that's sufficient for just one page. So I need to differentiate between a single page statement or a multiple page statement. So doing that right here, this is a single page, else it's a multi-page. So for a single page, it's relatively simple. What we want to do is we want to then create, all I want to do is simply copy the orders already correct. All I need to do is just copy the values and bring them directly over inside here. All the way, and I can do that with one line of code right here, meaning Z10 through AF in the last results row plus 7. Why does that happen, less 7? Because our original row starts on row 3, so we need to compensate for that difference in rows. So we're going to add 7 onto our destination rows. So we do that right here. And then it's simply going to take the last value. So this is going to bring over from BR3 to BX. So just simply BR all the way to BX, just bringing those values in, and that is it. Next up, what I want to do also for a single page is set that print area. So now I know that since we have a single sheet, I can set the print area. That print area is going to start up right up here, top of Z3, and it's going to go all the way down to the last row, including that comma. We're going to set it to AF40. So we have a very fixed print area, and we can do that with orders, page setup, print area equals Z3 through AF40. It's going to set that single page print area. That's all we have to do for our single page. What if it's a multiple page? If it's a multiple page, it's a little bit more tricky. We need to determine how many pages are there. And of course, you can create this way more than 3 pages. You can create as many as you want. Just keep copying down the template. 3 is sufficient for our training purposes. And so what are we going to do? Well, we need to determine the page quantity. And we know that we can have 26 items per page. So all we need to do is determine the last results row. The last results row of our results is here, and our last results row is 77. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 2, because certainly we can't count the first 2 rows, right? So I want to know that. I want to subtract 2. And then what we're going to do is divide that by 26, which is the number of items per sheet, right? So if I take that last result row and I subtract 2 for both header rows, divide it by 26, and I add 1 row, then I know that we're going to get the number of page quantities. So that is going to let us know. And of course, I only want a full number, so we're going to extract the integer of that. And that is going to get us the total number of pages. So for our sample here, it's going to be 3 pages. I also want to know the last page row. What is the last page row? I know, again, I want to determine the last page row. How do I know that? Well, I want to know the last page right here. What is the last page row? How do I know that? Well, first of all, I know that there's going to be 38 rows per page. If I scroll down here, we see it's 38. That includes, of course, the header and the footer, 38 total. So if I know 38 and I know I've got 3 pages, I can determine the last row, and this is 116. So we want to extract that last row. That last page row is going to be the number of pages times 38 plus 2. Of course, we have to add 2 again. Why are we adding 2? Because we're not including these first 2 rows up here. We've got 2 rows up here that we're not including, so we need to add 2. And that's going to get us our last page row. That's very important because we need to set that print area completely. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Now that we've calculated that last page row for our orders, we can determine the print area. So it's orders, page setup, print area, Z3 through AF, and the last page row. That's dynamic, whether we have 2 or as many pages as we need. That's going to be automatically. So now we've set the page, the last page row, and we set the print area. What I want to do is I'm going to run a loop from all the pages, right? I want to loop from 1 basically to all of the page rows. But we need to set an initial start row. I need to keep track of all the rows that are on. It can get kind of confusing. I know that our first values is 10 here. I know that our first row here is 3. I know that on the first page, our last row here, I know it's going to be 35. And I know the last row is going to be here 29, right? So keep that in mind, or 28. So here's what we're going to do. Is going to set all those up. Starting row, set that initial start row is 10. Our end row is 35. This is for our destination. Our original data, we're going to set the start database row and the end database row 3 to 28. Okay, so that's going to get us all the data. Now we're ready to run the loop. Remember, I want to run a loop through all the data. Basically, I want to get 26 rows here and then I bring them over, and then I want to go to the next 26, and then I want to determine the next however many, and then bring them over into the individual parts. So the first part's going to go here, second part's going to go here, and the remaining part's going to go here. Okay. All right, so that's exactly what we're going to do inside the code once we've set all of our initial variables here. So we're going to start our loop. For the page number, is going to be 1 to the page quantity. In our sample, it's going to be 3, so 1 through 3. So the first thing we're going to do is going to bring over the data. So Z and the start row through AF in the end row value. Remember Z here and the start row, which is 3, through AF and the end row is going to be equal to here our BR and the database start row through BX and the end row, whatever those variables are. And we're just going to bring them over. So that's going to add in the statement page data. That's going to bring in all the values for that single page, only for that single page. What I want to do now is I want to set the page break. And I want to set a very specific page break. If you'll notice, we see this onside the orders, we see a dotted line here. This is our page break. I want to make sure that that page break breaks properly so we can set that horizontal page break. And we know it's going to be the orders, the rows, the page number. Right? Let's say it's page number 1. Let's say it's page number 1 times 38 plus 3 is going to be 41, right? So 41 is going to be where our page break is. And that's right here. So our page break's right here on 41. So it's going to be the top of that. Right? So that's going to set our page break. So we know it's going to be broke on 41. That's going to set a manual page break that will set that horizontal page break. And this way we can do it dynamically. For the second one, it would be 2, of course, 2 times 38, 76 plus 3 is going to be 79. So we know that that second one is going to be break right here on 79. So we can use that formula to automatically set those page breaks each and every time. Next up, what I want to do is I want to update the start row. That start row is going to be start row plus 38. Why is that? Because that start row is going to start here. The second row here, we know that the start row here is 10. The second one's going to be 48, so we need to add 38 onto that. Right, so we're just going to increment that start row to up 38. The start database row is going to be the database row plus the start row. Remember, we're adding 26 rows, 26 items for each one. So the database row is simply adding 26. But now what I want to do is I want to run a check. I need to know what about the end row. Basically, what I want to do is I want to know if I look at the last row, I want to add, if I add, let's say on the last one, if I add all those up, I know that we have available 26. But if I look at the remaining and I see that the remaining is less than the number, then I know we're on the last page. So basically what we need to do is just check for the last page. If the last results row is greater than the end database row plus 26, and what does that mean? And that means basically if we take this number and we add 26 to it, what's larger? Our last database row here is 77. So if it's less, that means we have less items to fit. With less than 26, I know we're on the last page. So that's all we're going to check for. So if it's not, right, if the last results row is greater, means we're not, let's see, additional pages, not, just put not last page. So it's clear, last page. And this would be the last results row, else last page, last page. Okay, so we have that clear. So that's the last page. Okay, so for non-last page, we're simply adding 26 to our database because that's how many rows, and we're adding 38 to our orders, right? Because we have to have the header and footer, so that's 38, right? So our database is going to increment 26. Our order sheet for our statement is going to show up directly on 38. We're going to add 38 for that. However, if it is the last page, we only need to add as many that are left. We need to determine how many are left. So we're going to use this, the end row plus the last results row minus the end row plus 12. I know that's kind of tricky there, but all we need to do is we need to subtract out 12. Why is that important? Because 12 is the number of here. Take a look here. We need to subtract this here, number of rows here, 7, plus I need to also subtract the number of rows here, right? 5 here. So that's why we're subtracting 12 out. So I need to know basically how many are left here, determine this last row. I need to determine this last row here. What is the last row? So that's all we're doing, determine the last row so we can bring that over because it is the last page. The end database row is very simple. It's the last results row. Remember, we've already determined the last results row right here. So we know the last row of the database is based on the last row. That's relatively simple. So we're just setting the last row because it is the last page. Once we do it, we're just looping through that. That's all we need to do. That's going to create this. I know it's a little bit confusing, especially for the last row, but basically I just need to determine whatever's left and make sure to bring the last page over here. All right, the formulas we've already covered, we've gotten that, and so that's how we create it. So that's relatively simple as far as creating the statement. So then what we want to do is, like, for example, previewing the statement. All we need to do for every other macro, all we need to do is first create the statement and then preview it. So as you notice, we have a preview, print preview, which is kind of helpful. We can see it. If we click preview, all I need to do is it's going to preview that right inside here. And we see that it's page 1 of 3. We can go to next page, and that's going to preview it. That macro has been tied to this button here, and it is simply called statement preview. So first we're going to run the macro, the one that we just went over, then orders print preview equals true. Relatively simple. And that true, if you want to know, take a look at that. The definition of that is enable changes or not. So it allows, if we put false, users will not be able to make changes, but we're allowing them to make changes. Great. Well, what about printing out? Printing out, relatively simple. Again, what I want to do, but first I want to keep that in mind. I want to do something different. If I decide to print it out, I need to run a check. Let's go ahead and unhide these just as we did before. Let's unhide those. Okay. And so here we've got the invoice here. I need to unhide them all. So what I want to do is check. Notice I've given the option include selected invoice with a statement. So when I print this statement or I email this statement, I need to know if we're going to include. Maybe we want to send the customer not only the statement, but the invoice that's as well. So if we want to do that and I print, I need to check on that. So I've got this option box here, and we take a look based on B35. If we take a look at B35, we see that this simply basically include order not. So I need to check. If we're going to print this statement or if we're going to email this statement, are we going to print this order as well? Do we include this order or not? And so to do that, we just check on B35. So when we print out the statement, I'm simply going to check B35. If it's true, then I'm going to run the macro to print the order. That macro is based on our orders. We went over that in the original training, but it's right here. Orders print. All we're doing is setting the print area, making sure that we're setting it. That's very important because we're using two different print areas on the same sheet, statements and orders. So because of that, we need to make sure that we're setting the print area before we print it. That means it's going to reset it. So we're taking this away. And that is why every single time on the statement, create statement always resets the print area, right? Based on whether it is a single page or whether it is a multiple page, we're always resetting the print area because in this sheet, we have two different print areas. This is one print area, and this is the other print area all the way over here on the statement. So to do that, we need to make sure the VBA sets the print area based on what's being printed. Is it the order or the invoice, or is it the statement? So VBA will take care of the hard work for us on that. Okay, so on preview, all we're doing is creating the statement and then printing it. On the printout, we're checking it. We're going to print the order, and then we're going to create the statement. Again, running that macro again. This macro also, again, will automatically reset that print area, and then we're simply going to print it out based on the several factors, right? So these factors here, if we take a look, let's unhide those so we can see if we want to preview it. Print out, we don't want to preview it, right? We do want the active printer. We're going to use whatever the active printer is. I want false to print a file, and certainly I don't want to ignore the print areas. I want to make sure to keep those print areas, so that's going to be false there. Okay, great. So now what if we want to email the statement? Emailing a statement is relatively easy. If we click email, it's going to email that statement. And of course, if we do have the order option or the invoice option selected, it's going to email the statement and the invoice as well. So it's also going to give us some dynamic text. We've got the email the person. Please see the attached statement for this year. Please find the attached statement for your reference from the dates here. So we've got some dynamic information on the email as well. So we're going to take a look at that. Of course, if we unselect this invoice, it's only going to email the statement itself and not the order, right? So only the statement's going to be attached as well. So how do we do that? Well, let's go inside the VBA, of course, and take a look at the statement email. We're going to focus on the orders, right? I want to know if we're going to create an order or not. Remember, if we take a look inside this option right here, this particular option here is focused on connected to B35. B35 is true. It's going to, yes, we are going to add the order. B35 is false. We are not going to do it. So B35 is going to tell us. If B35 is true, then we're going to create a PDF for the order. So what we're going to do, we're going to again set that page, setting that print area, very, very important to set that print area for that invoice or order. We're going to set the order file is going to be based on the current workbook path. We're going to give it a backslash. And then what I want to do is I want to give it type of order. That type of order is located right here in B2. I want the name of that file to say invoice, and I also want the name of the file to include the ID located here in B5. So I want to have an underscore separating those. So we're going to have B2, which is the type, invoice or estimate or whatever it is, underscore, and then the ID number, B5. And then I want to end it with PDF. We are creating a PDF. That is going to be the file path for that. I do want to check if it exists. I want to make sure to delete it because it will create an error if we try to create it without first deleting a file with the same exact name. If you want to create unique items, of course, you can add date and time values to the name, which would create a unique one. So if the directory order file, VB directory, does not equal empty, that means it does exist with that exact name, then kill that order file. That's going to delete it if it exists. Then we're ready to create it. We're going to export it as a fixed format PDF, and basically it's simply going to print it as a PDF. The order file is where the path is going to be included, and then false. We do not want to open it after it's created. If this is true, it will open it after it's created. That's it. Then that's all we need to do to create the file. Of course, it hasn't been attached to the email yet. And then again, very, very important, we're going to run the macro to actually create that statement. Once that statement is created, we can then create a path for the statement, right? Remember, this particular macro also then sets the print area, but sets the print area based on the statement. Remember, inside the macro here, we went over this, creates a single page right here print area or a multi-page print area here, but that's going to create the print area so that when I print it out or export it as a PDF, it will automatically be completed. So then what we want to do is create a separate path for the statement file. The statement file is going to be this workbook. And I also want to base it on D15. What is D15? Well, D15 is our customer name. I want to put that customer name directly inside the name of the file. And then I want to put the underscore and then statement, the word statement, and then PDF. That is going to be the path. Again, just like we did above, where if that particular path is found already, we're going to delete it. We don't want duplicates. It would create an error. We're going to, just as we did before, export it, the statement file, right? This is the new path, right? We've already created that brand new print area up here in this macro. So it's going to create a brand new print. And then what we're going to do is ready to create the email. We've created both PDFs already here and here. If of course B35 is true, we're going to set the _Alec application as the _Alec application, making sure all the way up here inside the _Alec app as an object, _Alec app is an object, and _Alec mail is an object. So these two are objects. That's very important. Those could be inside the macro as well. That would be okay as well. All right, so what I'm going to do is once I've created the object, setting the _Alec application as Outlook.application. That will signal the _Alec application, and this will create the email inside the _Alec. So that'll create the email. Once the email's been created, we can set it up. I'm going to set the 2 to whatever's in B20. That is our email address that's been calculated right here based on the name here. So the email address here, located that person's email address. Once I have that, I want to add in the attachments. Attachments add, we're certainly adding the statement. Yes, that's important. But we may or may not add this order file. How will we know? Well, B35. If B35 is true, then we're simply going to add that order file as well. So both the order and the statement gets added, but only if B35 is true, right? Only if the user has selected. We're adding a subject with some dynamic information. Please see the attached statement for, right? What is that date range? D16. We're going to use that date range that the user has set. So this year, whatever it is. So that's what we're going to set inside there. Okay, so I think we got too many spaces here, but you get the point. So we're putting in that dynamic subject here with basically the date range name. And then also what I want to do is I want to set a basic body, hi, and then whatever their name is, and then a comma. And then I want to add a brand new line using VB_CRLF. That's going to add a new paragraph. Please find the attached statement for your reference from, and then I want to put the from date, D18, and I also want to put the to date, D19. So D18 here and D19. But I also want to make sure that those dates are formatted properly. So we can do that directly inside using the format here. Also, another one that would work would be application worksheet function text. That will also work here. D19 is the value here, and this is the format I'm going to set. I'm going to do exactly the same thing for the to date and D19 here. So D18 and D19 both get formatted dates. And then I want to display that email. I don't want to send it. Using .send would send it without displaying it. That's it. Cleaning it up, setting the _Alec mail to nothing. That's all we have to do to email the statement. Relatively simple. Okay, but what if I want to create all the statements? If we take a look in here, we see we've got another macro that I want to create all statements that are 90 days overdue. So if I email the statement, it's going to then create emails for every single customer that contains invoices that are 90 days overdue. So if we take a look here, we got here, find the attached statement here, order reference. If we take a look in this one, we see that this here has, of course, greater than 90 days overdue on this statement. And if we look at this one here, we also have greater than 90 days on this one, right? A large balance, okay? So we want customers that are 90 days overdue. And this is where the due date's going to come in handy, that the number of due days is going to come in handy. So that's where we have it. So that's what we're going to do right now. So it is actually the same macro that prints and emails, but we do make some differentiation inside, a special trick inside, of course, the macro. So that's the macro we're going to focus on now. And what we're going to do is I want to determine the result row, and the customer result row is long, and the customer name is a string. We're going to focus on that orders database. Again, we're going to be running an advanced filter here, but this time we do need the number of days due right here. I need to know the days overdue. Now is where we're going to bring in that formula. That's why we created it. So we're going to bring it. Determining the last row of our total data here. And then if the last row is less than 4, we exit the sub. Now is where we're going to bring in both formulas, M through N and M through N. And they're located in row 2. We're bringing both of them over. That's going to bring these two formulas, both balance and days overdue, bringing them all the way down here, okay, all the way to the last row. Once we have that, we're ready to run our advanced filter. Our criteria this time is going to be BZ2 through CB3. Let's take a look inside that all the way over here. BZ2 through CB3. This is where we have it. So let's take a look at this. We know that the order type is going to be based on the invoice order because we're going to focus. I want to know the balance has got to be greater than 0. And what about the days overdue? Well, that's going to be a little bit different because that's dynamic. Remember, inside our orders, we know that if we want it 30 days overdue, that's going to have to be 30 days, right? Not 90 days. So if we look on our database, we see that it's days overdue is now greater than 30. Well, how can we do that? Well, we can use a little table here. As you can see, we've got any balance here. If it's any balance, right, that could be fine, anything with a balance. Or what if it's overdue balances? Anything greater, let's take a look at that. That would be anything greater than 0. What about, let's take a look, I want to show you the first one, any balance. Any balance, I want to clear these out, completely clear these out so that there's nothing there. It means just using this balances. However, if it's going to be over 30 or over 60 or over 90, we're going to use just a little bit of a formula to help us with that. And as you see, we have a table here, right? This little table here, overdue balances list. This is where this list is coming from. If we look in the data, we look at the validation here, we see the balance list, and that balance list is located directly here. Any balance overdue, 30, 60, and 90 days, okay? They also have corresponding number of days here. So this, if the user selects this, this is what I want to appear in the criteria. If the user selects this, this is what I want to appear in the criteria. So that's what we're going to do right here. So I can use a little formula to do that. If the order D29 equals A29, then 0. What does that mean? And that means if it A29, any balance, if it's any balance, then 0, right? That doesn't matter. However, if it's not, then what do I want to do? Then I want to index B30 through 30. This is our named range. And I want to use a match based on D29. And basically, I want to extract whatever's located in here. So basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to index here all the way B20, let's see, B30 through 33, I think, or 29 through 30, actually. And so I'm going to index that, but I'm going to use a match. I want to match whatever's located in D29. I want to match it so that I know the row it's been found. Once I know the row, I can extract whatever's in B and place that directly inside here. So that's what happens. We're indexing B. We're indexing the results that we want. We're matching it based on whatever's in D29. Whatever that list is, A30 through 33. And that's it. We're going to use that first column. So that way, that criteria, the days overdue, is based on whatever the user has selected. So if they select greater than 60 or greater than 90, whatever it is they select, it's going to show up right here. We're going to use that as our criteria. Now, all I really want is the results is the unique customers. I want those results. I want to loop through all the unique customers that meet that criteria from 3 to the last criteria. I'm going to take that customer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in orders and I'm going to place that customer right in here. Once the customer is there, I'm going to then generate that particular statement based on that customer. It's going to generate that statement, and we're going to be able to email it or print it from there. That's what we're going to do inside the macro. So once we've created our unique customer in CD2, remember, just our unique customers are going to go inside the order base. All we want is the customer name starting in CD2. Once we determine the last row, making sure that we have one based on CD, if there's less than 3, then let the user know that no statements are available. Maybe there's no customer balances with orders. Let's say overdue 90. Maybe there's no customers. So you want to let the user know if there's no data and exit the sub. But if there is data, we're going to loop through the data, starting in the result row from 3 to the last result row. Loop through all the customers to create the statements. I'm going to put that customer name inside of string variable from CD in the result row. So basically, we're looping through the customers and we're putting it in a variable. And just to make it easier, until we know what it is, I'm going to take that variable, I'm going to place it directly inside of D15. So inside the orders, D15 is going to take on that customer name. I'm going to calculate it just to make sure that all the formulas get calculated. Then I'm going to run that same macro to create the statement, that first macro. That's going to create the statement. Now is the cool part, right? So I don't want to create the same macro again just for printing and emailing statements, right? If I print the statements, I want to use the same exact macro to print both of those to our local printer, print all the statements associated to the printer. However, I also want to use the same macro for email. So I've used the same macro here. If we take a look at the macro sign, right click, sorry, it's off the screen, assign macro, we see that the macro sign is called statement create all. If I take a look inside the print all statement, we see assign macro, again, the same macro, statement create all. It is the same macro that's been assigned. So if we put the same macro on 2 different buttons, how do we know which one the user click? How do we know if we're going to print or email? Well, we can use the name of the button, right? If we take a look at this name, it's called print statements. If I take a look at this icon here, it's also called print statements. Let me select only the icon here. It's also called print statements. So both the icon and the button have exactly the same name. If I take a look at the email, again, also, this is called email statements. The icon itself, unselecting the button, selecting the icon, is called email statements. So the icon, now remember, you can easily do that through the selection pane. We can then sign those names or change those names through here or here, okay? And so both of these have print statements and names. So I know based on the button, the name of the button that the user clicked, which one they want to do. So we can extract that through application caller. If application caller, meaning the name of the button, equals print statement, then we know they wanted to print it. Then all we need to do is orders, print out, and then set all. So all we need to do is print them. However, if they've emailed, so basically using the name of the button easily, we can then create 2 different scenarios based on whichever button they've clicked. Otherwise, it's the email statement. In this case, statement file is going to be this workbook. We're setting the statement file just as we did before. If it exists, we're killing the file. We're going to create that file just as we did before. We're going to set the email just as we did before, setting the orders to the customer email, attaching that statement file through that, setting the same subject, setting the same body as we did before, and displaying it. That's it. So that's all we have to do, and simply looping through each customer. So next result row. So we're looping through all the customers, creating those. And of course, if you were doing this, you'd set it to .send. You probably wouldn't display all those emails. So in a single button, we can email all of the customers with any balances or with overdue balances or whatever settings you set here with a single button, or print them out very, very easily. All right, well, that's it for today. Not that long of a one. Finally, one that's decent time, not hours and hours and hours. I'm really happy you joined us. Please don't forget, if you do want to support us, so many ways. Another great way is our Patreon platform. In our Patreon platform, I do go way beyond our trainings here. Any ideas that you might have or things that you want, features you may want to add, I do that in Patreon. You give me your ideas and I add on features. Or maybe you're having an issue and something needs to be fixed. I do that on our Patreon. Or maybe you want me to focus on an area that's a little bit confusing. That as well. Beyond that, every single week I create a brand new training video with a brand new updated workbook that includes all of those features, fix, or focus areas, along with a whole lot more. If you want PDF downloads of all the codes, that's available. I've also got early discounts, lots of features, and of course, we have downloadable videos. If you want to download these videos for offline use, I've got that and a whole lot more. Tons of benefits going on our Patreon platform. So I hope you'll join us there. I'll include the links down below. Thank you so much for your continued support. It's been a great training. Customer statements. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.